All right, it's coming on the top of the hour. I have 10 a.m. We will get started. Good morning, everyone. We're going to talk about PCI compliance that's coming due. We have a couple of things. So, Joe, if you want to do your part, and then we can get started.
Thank you for everybody for joining us this morning for what is part of our OHLA Innovation and Technology Initiative. OHLA's innovation and technology efforts were created to bring new partners with new solutions into the industry, to identify pain points for hotel and lodging businesses that can be addressed through the creation and adoption of new ideas, and to support emerging technologies in the hospitality space. We do that by involving partners like some of the partners you're going to hear from today, public agencies with resources to help us facilitate and fund these solutions, and bringing an open mindset. You have, I hope, seen in your email, because everybody on the list for this event is also on the list to receive our Innovation and Technology Download newsletter in your email, which has updates on key topics specifically in this space. So continue to watch for more information on that. And we do have an Innovation and Technology Committee filled with volunteers that are addressing these ideas. And our committee chair is Keaton, who is also the president of the firm Defenovate. They provide information technology and cybersecurity solutions to hospitality businesses to help you secure your customer data, to optimize your operations, and to ensure 24/7 IT support. Keaton and his team help hotel and lodging businesses stay protected, efficient, and ahead of the curve. And we're proud to be working with him, and we endorse Defenovate as one of our key innovation and technology partners. I want everybody to feel free to reach out to him about any of your needs in these areas, and he'll have contact information at the end of the presentation. And joining Keaton today is George Plitus, founder and CEO of Sentry. Sentry makes complex compliance and cybersecurity solutions straightforward for you and provides accessible solutions for enterprises across various sectors, including hospitality. George is an expert in the field of PCI compliance, so we appreciate the chance to work with him on this particular problem and the pending deadline that will be coming up shortly. And thank you, George, for being part of this. I appreciate all of you for participating in our Innovation and Technology Initiative and topics. Watch for more information as we launch the 2.0 version of innovation and technology efforts this year with the committee's help. And if you're interested in getting involved in other ways, including if you might want to put somebody forth for consideration for involvement on the committee, feel free to get in touch with me or our committee chair, Keaton, going forward. So with that, gentlemen, thank you for presenting on this very important and timely topic today.
Great, thank you, Joe. Appreciate the intro and the endorsement. That is greatly appreciated. Um, First thing I want to say again, thank you. I know we all have busy lives, but for the next 90 minutes, I think this is a very important topic we need to talk about. It impacts a lot of business, especially hospitality, and why PCI is such a critical part of it. It is, we're protecting guest information, avoiding fines, and then there's a reputational reputation that about your business. And then we've got some examples that we'll talk about in the future and how it came about, what to do with it, and then we'll have some strategies to talk through. We'll give you some real life examples, and then we'll have some time. Um, we'll go through some interactive things. So again, this is very informal. If you guys do have a question, just jump in, ask questions, or if there's something that we're going to talk about, I will defer it to the next slide, or just put it up in the chat, and then Michelle will help us get your answers, get your questions answered. Okay, so let's get started. The question back to George. George, if you want to just say a few words before we get started, and then we can talk about PCI a little bit. So just kind of introduce yourself a little bit.
Thank you, Keaton. Thank you, Joe. My name is George Plitus. I'm honored to be here speaking with everyone and talking about one of my favorite topics, maybe not everyone's favorite topic, but PCI DSS. And I've been working on PCI and other compliance frameworks for over 20 years. And I look forward to diving in with Keaton and answering your questions.
All right, let's so just simplicity. George, what is PCI DSS? What does it mean? What does it stand for?
Okay, this will be the only time that I spell it out completely. The rest of the time, we'll just refer to it as PCI DSS. It stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. That is what PCI is. And in 2004, the different card brands, such as Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Diners, they formed a committee called the PCI Security Standards Council to amalgamate all of the different standards that they had to have one unified, consistent approach to protecting credit card information and payment card data.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Um, can you talk about standards and guidelines and brands that are involved in the compliance and what are the standards and guidelines?
Okay, yeah, first and foremost, I think we should cover that PCI is not an act, meaning it's not law, it's an industry standard, and it's enforced by the PCI Security Council. And that is made up of the major card brands of Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. While the Security Standards Council creates the guidelines, the card brands are actually the ones who enforce it. So, how do they enforce it? They do it through, unfortunately, if a company does not comply or fails to comply, then the card brands and the acquiring bank may impose fines for noncompliance. They may increase transaction fees if a company is not compliant. And in the worst case, they may potentially suspend or revoke payment processing capabilities and privileges, which would be a real knock on any company if they're not able to accept credit cards.
And how does these brands or PCI, if you are, if you don't follow the instructions or you're not compliant, how do they go about finding and proving, that you're not in compliant?
Well, you have to prove to them that you are compliant, but should there be a breach of credit card information or payment card data, we'll use those terms interchangeably. If there is a breach and an audit has to happen, they will check to see if you are in compliance or not, and then they will take the necessary steps from there to see how much to fine, if a fine is necessary, if you've met the standards. You could just imagine that if there was a breach and they got involved, they're going to find something that is out of compliance. Let's be realistic. So that's typically how they go about it, through a forensic investigation plus an intense audit.
Yeah, we'll talk about what happened as MGM learned a really good lesson. They got fined $45 million, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And they gave them a reason to go dig. So, more important lessons learned is if you're in compliant and don't give them a reason to keep digging, right? I guess maybe that's the moral of the story there. So, all right, okay, great. Any questions, guys, so far? We're going at a good pace. Just again, just stop me. Um, can we talk about it? And I think this kind of gets a little confusing. So how a business is categorized under PCI? There's a misconception about dollar amounts, but I think transactions. So can we spend a little time on this and then just talk about how a business is characterized in PCI?
Certainly. Yeah, this is probably one of the areas that is most or least understood. So PCI, basically Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and the Security Council, they do not care about the transaction amount. They care about the number of cards that are being processed. Okay, so that's the first thing. So if you have, say, you're lucky enough to do $1 million transaction, that only counts as one card number. What they care about is the number of cards and the number of transactions. So starting from the top, the highest audited level is a level 1 merchant. Okay, and you have to process over 6 million transactions, not dollar amount, but transactions in a 12-month rolling period. It's not from January to December. They have the right to take a look at your payment processing patterns and determine what level you are. So essentially, over 6 million transactions in a 12-month rolling period, or any company that has suffered a data security breach or a payment card breach. Okay, so you could be a level 4, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes. But level 4 is it's not as rigorous from an audit perspective. But if you suffer a breach, you're going to get bumped into level 1. And why do you not want to be a level 1? I mean, ideally, if you're processing 6 million transactions a year, it's a good thing. Business is good. But if you're one of the lower levels, level 2 through 4, and you get bumped up to a level 1, you have to have a very intense annual audit by an auditor called a QSA. QSA is Quality Security Assessor. They're certified by the PCI Council as having the necessary steps and understanding. And it's a very intense audit lasting several weeks. It's very costly. A lot of evidence needs to be provided to the QSA auditor in order to pass you for PCI. If it could be avoided, it should be avoided. Level 2 is between 1 to 6 million transactions. And this is where things get a little different. You have the exact same standards for all levels, but now you don't have to do an intense audit. The QSA will review a self-assessment questionnaire that each organization has to fill out on their own. And so just consider it an audit light, just a light version of the exact same audit. Same standards apply, but it's not as rigorous. And so this is a good place to be if you can do a little bit of scope minimization, which I think we're going to touch on in later slides. If you could split up the businesses in different ways, so they don't roll up into one master merchant account, you might be able to get from a level 1 down to a level 2. You do the self-assessment questionnaire, and the QSA basically reviews it. They do ask some questions, but it's clearly not as rigorous. And then Kitan, that moves us to level 3, which is between 20,000 to 1 million transactions. But those 20,000 are typically e-commerce transactions. So if you're processing 20,000 e-commerce, you still have to fill out the same self-assessment questionnaire, but no auditor. Okay, you just fill out your self-assessment questionnaire as truthfully as possible, and you send it to your payment processor, who's the ones requesting the evidence. And then the last level is level 4, which is a lot of mom and pop shops, small organizations, fewer than 20,000 transactions, not over 20, fewer than 1 million transactions, and less than 20,000 e-commerce transactions. Again, self-assessment questionnaire. Now, for any one of these, I just want to reiterate, if there is a breach, they will bump you up to a level 1, which is somewhere that you want to try to avoid if it's possible.
Okay, great. So if there is a breach, how does a merchant comply with different level of requirements? What happens if a merchant does not comply?
If they don't comply, it's very likely they will get fined in a variety of different ways. And it's something that it can be avoided for the most part. Hackers are relentless, constantly thinking up new ways to attack organizations. It's a big business in their eyes. So the best way is just to avoid having a breach, and then you will not have the fines. You will not have, the scrutiny and also, the privacy laws that apply with them as well. So it's not just payment card; it'll be other standards as well.
Yeah, and specifically for hospitalities, we have branded hotels that have through property management systems, and they'll run their transactions on it. But what in a scenario where there's a hotel that has a bar, so that's a third party, but also within a restaurant, say they have a restaurant and then they have a different software that they use for menu options or sales processing from a restaurant, and that's an e-commerce side part of it. So how does that all get integrated into per site, or how does PCI look at that as a sale for a property management for a hotel sales versus say a restaurant sales? Is that e-commerce, or does that differentiate between the level one and level three?
Well, all the different transaction types will be rolled up together. Now, there are some nuances to this. This is where the devil is in the details, and there isn't a clear answer. But as close to a clear answer is that if the restaurant has a different merchant account and the hotel, as an example, has a separate merchant account, and they do not roll up into the same master merchant account, or sometimes referred to as a chain account. So a chain account could have multiple other merchant accounts underneath, one for the restaurant, say one for parking. I'm just making up an example, one for the hotel. If they roll up into one, then they're all counted as one account. If they happen to be separate merchant accounts, completely separate, then they are counted individually. And so then the levels would apply individually as opposed to en masse for the entire amount. Is that clear, Keaton? Because I could go on a little bit further.
Yeah. No. I think the point here, from what I understand, is that as long as there's a hotel sales versus a restaurant sale, and if you have different merchant accounts, then the transactions are kept separate, and then that way you're still in that level two, level three type stuff, and they don't punish you for summing everything into one, as long as the merchant accounts are separate, right? Is that my understanding?
Correct. And as long as those merchant accounts do not roll up into one master merchant account, then yes.
Okay.
If they roll up, it's kind of like a pyramid. If they all roll up into the one master account at the top, then they are counted together. Otherwise, considered separate.
All right. What is the most common mistake businesses make when determining their PCI compliance or levels?
Levels? Well, I'll tell you this. One of the things that I recommend my clients is, rather than guessing or going to your ERP or your accounting system and seeing how many transactions there are, your payment processor is obligated to tell you what level you're in. So you could get the information from whoever you process with. So whoever is providing the authorization, the decline, the pre-auth, you could ask them and they could provide it to you. I guess the most common mistake would be, I see a question. Linda, we'll get to that in just a moment. Uh, yeah, so basically, if you just rely on your own database, you might be fairly accurate, but it's best to go with your payment processor. So what is a master merchant account is the question I saw. A master merchant account, it takes a lot of different names, but the best example, let me think of an analogy. Let's step outside of hospitality for a second and just talk about a company like Home Depot. So Home Depot has a lot of different locations throughout North America, but they have a master account. So the stores are not treated individually. They have their own merchant account where deposits are made, but their overall security from the eyes of the PCI Security Council goes up to the master account, which is Home Depot's head office. And so Home Depot would be classified as the transaction volume of all the individual stores. So they would obviously be 6 million transactions or level one. Does that make sense? It's kind of like a pyramid like structure where if you have a master account from a head office and individual locations, those individual locations will get counted as part of the head office's um, overall count and level.
Okay.
Thank you, Linda. Okay. Yes, I
All
understand.
right. Um, any questions regarding this transaction count? I know this is where it gets a little confusing between the dollars and everything. And then if we have some time, we'll keep moving on here. We've got a lot to cover, but we got some Q&A time, and we can come back to it. And just for technical reasons, I've got my screen on here. I'm not looking at chat, so Michelle or George, if somebody asks a question, just stop me, and then we can move on. Um, you know, how is PCI compliance enforced? How do they enforce that you're in compliant?
Okay, well, first, the card brands push it down, push their requirements down based on the fraud that they have seen over a period of time. They push it down to the PCI Security Standards Council. They then pass it down to the acquiring banks, which is basically the merchant bank. And then from there, it's pushed down to each individual merchant or chain. Um, and one of the things that a lot of people wonder is PCI mandatory? Is it an optional thing? It is not. If you process, store, or do transactions, store, process, or transact, um, you are you have to be in compliance with PCI. It's not an optional thing. So it's pushed down from those organizations I just mentioned. It is mandatory, and it's uh, it's been around for 20 years, so most people do know about it. It's just the changes that we're here to highlight.
Okay, cool, thank you. Who must comply with PCI?
Compliance is anyone that stores, processes, or transmits credit card information must comply with PCI. Whether it's a front desk or concierge, in-room dining in restaurants, gift shops, restaurants, spas, uh, parking meters that are under your control, and so on and so on. Basically it's pretty wide reaching as long as a credit card is being accepted.
Okay, cool, thank you. What are the penalties if you're not in compliant?
Well, this is where it gets a little tricky. It's not a set amount, but it's fines can start from as little as 5,000 to 500,000 per month, that is, for non-compliance. So if, let's just say one of the smaller merchants that we discussed earlier, this lowest transaction volume, a level four, if they were seen, if they had a breach and then a forensic audit were to occur and they were found to be out of compliance, they would get fined up to 5,000 or greater every month that they're out of compliance. And then they would have to do that audit, the intense audit that we discussed earlier, in order to prove that they are in compliance. And then guess what will happen, Kitan? Basically, once you're on the radar, it's very difficult to get off the radar. So it's something that if it can be avoided, it should be avoided. Um, yeah, you don't want to be in the spotlight with the PCI
Yeah,
standard.
when we talk about examples in breach and compliances, MGM learned a very um, hard lesson, and especially specifically why this is important, guys, is after the hack that happened at MGM at Caesar within the last 2 years, a lot of the rules and regulations have changed. So this is why it's more important. So even if everything has happened and compliance, and all the states are in different compliance time, but there's been a lot of court cases, a lot of litigation and settlement, and the court systems are setting the standards here. So that's part of what we're covering here too. So any questions so far, guys? All right, moving on. What are the key deadlines in PCI? Can we cover that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to go over it. There's something just came to mind that I want to also mention. The reason for these are global timelines. They don't just apply to the hospitality industry, but for hospitality, the reason why a lot of organizations are at higher merchant levels, higher meaning from one going backwards, one being the highest. It's because of high transaction volume. So there are often, you know, big targets. There's multiple access points, like we talked about, POS terminals, restaurants, gift shops, and so on. And in some cases, there might be older IT infrastructure. And all of this rolls up into the key deadlines, which there's always a deadline for PCI, and they change their standards about once every 4 years with very minor revisions along the way. Like right now, we're at 4.0, but it's actually 4.01. They made a couple of wording changes, and this happens throughout the 4 year life cycle. 4 years is not set, by the way, between one standard to the next standard, but it's a general guideline that we've seen in the industry. They're not PCS Security Standards Council is not obligated to do it every four, but that's just been their pattern. So right now, in this current incarnation, 4.0, basically 3.21, which was the previous standard, it got retired about a year ago on March 31st, 2024. Okay. And then they basically we eased into the new 4.0, but not with the full set of requirements. So that full set of requirements is coming up on March 31st. So today being the 20th, um, that's 11 days away for full compliance required. And so the grace period is very quickly, if you're not prepared, it's going to be tough to do it all in 11 days. But if you've been working hard, then it's definitely doable.
What does that mean to the hospitality business when if they're not in fully compliant? What does that mean?
Well, it means that you might not be able to get your PCI certification for the year. I don't think I have mentioned it, but your PCI certification has to be renewed on an annual basis. So let's just say April 1st was your last year's audit when you finished either your self-assessment questionnaire or your QSA-driven audit, basically the auditor, they signed off on the date, then you have 12 months to get your next certification. So really, it's not 12 months because you have to get started well ahead of time. But anyhow, just to keep it simple, it's on an annual basis, and it, that's I don't know how much more to say. Katan, is there
Yeah,
anything?
no, and not to, I know these deadlines have come and gone, but from my experience, what we've seen in talking with cyber attorneys, even if you are not in fully compliant, and especially this latest lawsuit settlement that MGM did, and in talking with cyber attorneys, as long as they you can prove to a legal, obviously you are in court, you are litigating, you are doing this, but not to get the fines and everything, attorneys can, if you've done a what they call, the court seems that's a reasonable security system. So you're, number one, your head's not in the sand, and you're doing something proactively, not reactively. And as long as there's a process that you have in play and saying, hey, within even the next 6 months or whatever, you're going to get it done. The courts are going to be a little bit more lenient on getting you compliant. So number one, just because the date has come and gone and you're not in compliance, so yes, legally you are breaking the law, or you're not the law, but you are not in compliant. And you can get some fines, so that's just a red flag. But with a good attorney and things like that, and we'll talk about that here of how we go about doing that. But it's not the end of the world. Your business is not going to shut down tomorrow and all that kind of stuff. But court cases are leaning, judges are leaning to say, hey, given the time, given what you have, get it all cleaned up, and then get it done and take it seriously.
Yeah.
Any questions so far, guys? Okay, George, what are the significant changes in PCI 4.0 compared to the previous one from 3 to 1?
Okay, so some of the changes are more rigorous multi-factor authentication. I'll explain what that is. That's the two-factor authentication that we get. Hopefully, everybody has it on their banking, not just for business, but for personal, logging into various other social sites and so on. Multi-factor authentication is something you know, something you have, uh, and those two. That's why they call it multi-factor: something you know and something you have. Something you have might be a a rotating one-time password or a token on your phone. Could be an SMS message that you receive on your phone that's registered with that service. From PCI perspective, it's typically an app on the phone, or some legacy systems still use RSA tokens, which some of us may know what those are. That's the little fob that you put on your keychain that rotates the password every 60 seconds. Depends on the technology, but usually 30 to 60 seconds. So
Hey, Maggie, Mom.
rig,
Hi.
rigorous MFA factors. Folks, if whoever is not on mute, if you could just put yourself on mute. So MFA and stronger encryption requirements, and there's expanded password security requirements, moving from 7 to 8 characters. I think it was 8 characters in the past. Now it's a mandatory 12 characters, and there's some further enhancements to that as well. They recommend 16. That's a lot of characters for people that just want to put simple passwords in. I recommend against it. Try to pick a passphrase and use MFA. I'll tell you this. I'm just going to take a step back, Katan. Just because I'm in the industry and I've seen so many horror stories, I would have MFA on my car every time I were getting into my car. If I could do MFA to start it, I would. I know where I live, there's definitely a car theft problem, but it's going to get there. I've talked to some of the insurance companies, and they're mandating, or they're working with technology providers for vehicles. But I digress. So the MFA minimum passwords moving back to PCI again, and then stronger encryption standards. So there's new enhanced protocols for cardholder data in transit and at rest. So they have further clarifications. These have always been a requirement, Catan, but now they're just enhancing the controls around these. And they've introduced something else now from a governance perspective, for an organization to have oversight into the overall operations, is they are mandating these threat risk assessments, or targeted risk analysis, I should say, targeted risk analysis (TRAs), which force the organization to look at their encryption standards to see if they feel it's enough, if their password standards are enough. So it's an introspective look. It makes you dig deep with your IT teams to see if you're doing enough based on the information that is entrusted to you, the payment card information. Those are the major standards. There's a few other little tweaks, but um, between the three that are on there, MFA, expanded password requirements, and targeted risk assessments, those are the major changes. And then there's obviously more frequent testing, and logging and monitoring is more intense now.
Yeah, as again, going back to not to beat this thing to death, but again, when court cases are happening, the litigation lawyers and everything that we can give them is first thing, when even if say it's April 1st and you want to start on a compliance, the first thing people look at is the risk assessment and your biggest gap that you have, just concentrating on that and filling your gaps in is the first step to it. And then as we are getting more and more into it, as we talk about emphasis, like George mentioned, these were here in 3.2.1, but in compliant in 4.0, the more emphasis is on security testing, doing the pen testing, the vulnerability testing, and then even more importantly now, and I've seen in cases where logging and monitoring, making sure, just even when you're doing your SAQs and saying, yep, I checked it off. But if you don't have those pen testing, which are third party pen testing, or even if you're an assessor and having some kind of a 12-month revolving data report. So when you do your testing, save your data, guys. Save them in a PDF, put them in a way. That way, if something does happen, and if you're working with an attorney or you're working with somebody, these guys come knocking, you can say, here's what I've done to be, here's what I've done. You may not have to be all 100% compliant, but at least if you've taken some measurements of actively doing it, the cases are in your favor. So George, what is the first step business can take to start getting all these gap assessments and things? What do they need to do?
Well, the first thing is to get yourself, or an organization should get themselves familiar with the standards. So understand what the changes are. If you've been doing it for years, then just understand the differences between the previous versions and the new version, 4.0. So that would be the first step. So just understand what the landscape looks like. The landscape changes. From there, if it's very it's not the easiest standard to understand for individuals that are outside of the compliance space. Okay, so if you don't understand some of the requirements, best thing to do is to seek assistance from an expert. Um, they will be able to explain things. One of the things that I work on most with clients is basically taking a look at their business flows and their transaction flows and deciding on which hills to die for, like which ones to go all the way with and put technology and process in place, potentially cost, and the ones that could just be solved by having a couple of meetings, document it, like you said, just put it in a PDF and the QSA will sign off on it. At first, it'll seem like a monumental task, like a huge mountain to climb with the different changes, but not all of them are really that intense. So if you get the right expert guidance, or if you yourself understand compliance quite well, then it will just be to breaking up the different requirements into small, medium, and large effort, or small, medium, and large technology costs. That's the first approach that I would take. So a gap assessment is the best way to get started.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, moving on. Um, so how has am I hold on, did I get
Yeah, I think you were on the right. Perfect.
okay. How has I think my slides are off, guys. Okay, so I'm going back and forth. Sorry about this.
You should go back.
How has ransomware evolved in recent years? So, can we talk about, in the last 2 years, we've seen MGM, Caesar Entertainment. I mean, these guys have, big dollars behind it, but they still got hacked. So how is that? How has the ransomware um, evolved in the last 2 years?
Well, I mean, it's a constantly evolving space. If you happen to know anyone or are part of an IT shop, um, ransomware is the biggest threat on the market right now. It is big business for the hackers. It's constantly evolving. There are multiple cyber groups that are focusing on it. They use different frameworks to encrypt a company's data, different approaches. Some use social engineering, like phishing and phone calls to try to manipulate staff. Others will try to break in through your firewalls, maybe even the firewall. There was a big attack that happened recently on Sonic Wall firewalls, where hackers were getting in. And once they're in, they either have an ID, they work their way up to a privileged account, which is some type of an account that will run the POS systems or your booking system or something like that, and then they're able to encrypt the data. So the it's constantly evolving. That's the one thing. one thing that I noticed just being in the industry for over 20 years is I observed in the early days when ransomware became a thing, um, was that initially hackers would either focus on stealing data or data exfiltration, as we call it in the industry. So they would steal the data, or when ransomware first started, or a separate group would do the ransomware, which is encrypting all the systems so nothing could be used. Your POS terminal is down, your booking systems are down, your restaurant system is down. Then I noticed about, don't quote me on it, but roughly 8 years ago, the attackers started noticing, or I started noticing that the attackers were using a new technique and tactic, which was to steal the data first and then do the ransomware. And so then the industry shifted to, well, we got to have good backups. When ransomware first started coming out, then we can restore from our backups. But why the attackers they became wise to this is, well, okay, even if you restore your systems from backup, we have your data, and we're gonna ask a ransom to delete the data from our stores, from our file, databases, or we're gonna dump all your customer records onto the internet and or sell it on the dark web. So basically, the biggest change to the ransomware landscape is now they're exfiltrating and then encrypting systems, and they're demanding the ransom. So even if you're prepared with good backups, you're not able to get out of the situation. There could still be a privacy concerns, or basically your customers, your clients' information is being sold on the dark web. And this does happen. I have occasionally I will go to the dark web just to take a look around at what is up for sale, and there you could buy a credit card for a couple of dollars for a low level card, or if you want a gold card, it might cost you about $8 or $9 for a credit card. So
Wow.
it's big business for them.
How can businesses protect themselves? How
Oh,
can
there's a lot of different ways that they can protect themselves. Um, there is one of the best ways is keep up with patching. So Microsoft no longer allows you to go too long without patching your computer, but I know a lot of people in the past, before Windows 11, they would see the patch icons coming up on their home computers, and just silence it for months and months and months. But those patches, they're not only there for functionality, they're there to plug security holes in the operating system. The same applies to back-end systems, to firewalls, to wireless guest wireless access points, to all equipment basically. So keeping up with patching, always maintaining offline backups so that you can restore and at least get your business functioning should there be either a cyber attack or a non-cyber attack. You need your backups to be able to restore your systems. Um, Strengthening authentication, having strong passwords, having multi-factor authentication, that is a big step in the right direction. Monitoring your systems. So having, like you were talking about with the logging and monitoring earlier, that you could prove with your lawyer that you're taking the necessary steps. Have really good monitoring. So every time somebody logs onto a system, have a log entry for it, so that if you ever have to step back and take a look at what happened, you're able to do that. Restrict who has administrative privileges. Not everybody in a company should have administrator or that high level account. Let's just take a restaurant. Only the manager, maybe a team lead or a supervisor might need to have that privileged account that allows for adding people, deleting people, maybe doing refunds and so on. So limit that to as few people as possible, because the more people that know it, it's just a bigger target for the hacker to try to get that from them. And then the last one that I'm going to mention, there are more steps, is just to do consistent employee training to recognize different types of threats. Phishing is changing, especially with AI and technologies like ChatGPT. Hackers are leveraging GPT to come up with more realistic phishing. In the past, many of you know, phishing used to be broken English. So you could spot it pretty easily because, it was coming from outside of North America. So their English wasn't good. But now with GPT, everything is spot on and perfect. So more frequent training will allow employees to have a better grasp on when they're being phished. So just on a consistent cycle, it doesn't have to be the 1 hour security awareness training, which should be done once a year at minimum. It could be newsletters, it could be emails sent out from the IT department saying, look, keep an eye out for this type of a risk.
And I'll add to that from my experience, guys. So two things, going back to passwords and talking about AI. I know 4.0 recommends 8 to 12 character password, but the reality of what's happening today is 16 letter character passwords are coming, guys. It's mandated. It's not mandated today, but it's coming. People are starting to get there, so start getting used to it. Is my point. Is a good practice. And the reason that's important is because of AI. Hackers are getting more sophisticated using AI. If any historically speaking, insurance data show when these ransomwares are coming, if a hacker would take 12 hours to hack your system, they are doing it in 12 minutes with AI. So, if you're doing a 16 character phrase, singing in the rain, is a perfect example, something like that. So, start. So when next time a password changes happen and you need to do it, just bite the bullet, do the 16-bit character and then just start moving forward, doing that. So that's one change. And then the other thing that I also have seen, and again, these are court cases that saying that when you limit people to give access, even like a data closet, having a camera on your data closet is important. So it's just those simple things like that you can do something like that. And then also specifically, what I've seen in the hospitality industries, if you may have different vendors, it's a 24-hour business, right? So if a telecom guy is coming in to say, hey, I'm going to work on your telecommunication, he comes in on a third shift and he's going to get in a data closet, make sure they valid, make sure it's the right people, and it's just not a stranger. And if it's a stranger, have your people say something about it, right? So it's just, again, very common sense type stuff, and just again, be cautious about things like that, right? Um, just why hospitality continues to experience high hits. Can we talk about why is it such a, even with these bigger companies having deep pockets, deep everything, why are they still getting hit?
Well, because they have the new oil, which is called data. So it's been called the new type of oil. Data is gold, basically gold. It's a lot of value for attackers. They're able to sell it. Payment cards. They're able to use them fraudulently, and all of the guests' information that they get, the attackers know that they are able to ask for the ransom and may or may not get to it. As is the case in Caesar, they actually paid the fine, but they paid the ransom request. They negotiated a little bit, but they did bring it down. But they're just, it's a juicy target from an attacker's perspective. There are other industries that are targeted as well, but this is definitely one where they know that they're going to get a good foothold in with their organization, because organizations like MGM, Motel One, Caesar, and a few others, they don't want the reputational hit of having to disclose that they've been attacked and that the attack was successful.
And even as part of, a lot of incident response stuff that we do, and now I know there's again, going back to litigation, there's laws in here, and I think this is more of a, if you're a publicly traded company, you have 4 days to report that you got hacked. And that's where that 8K filing requirements is with the with the SEC. that you have to be filed, you got hacked, right? And part of the problem that I've seen is how, if you're an IT person, how do you know you got hacked versus your systems are down, right? And there's been one example it didn't happen in the hospitality industry, but in reading with it, and this happened in the last, I think it happened in 2023, I forget who it happened to, but what had happened was, they got hacked. The company did not respond or file, let law enforcement, and in this case would be the FBI, to let them know that they got hacked. So the hackers reported the company for not reporting it. They got more in trouble with that kind of stuff. So, again, getting organized, getting all these things, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, on incident response and what you got to do. But the main fact here is that MGM got hit, and especially with the hotel industry getting hit in the last 2 years, right? I mean, basically happening. And again, these are customers' data. And one of the things, and I know, George, you and I talked about this before, is 50 states have compliance requirements, and can you talk a little about how the transaction, so we've got hotels here in Ohio, but if a customer comes from California and their data is hacked, how does that impact the hotel here in Ohio?
Right. Actually, that's a good point. So, Katan, what happens is, if the resident is a visitor to your hotel, as an example, and their information is breached, you have to comply with where they originated from. So, California is a good example. Other states have pretty rigorous privacy laws as well. Texas, New York, and Virginia is coming up shortly. But and then there's also over the pond in Europe, the GDPR. So if their residents are coming to your hotel, then you have to comply with their regulations. So just making it a little bit more localized, if California residents are coming to your hotel and you have greater than 50,000 transactions and a certain dollar value, um, you have to comply with CCPA, which is the California Consumer Protection Act, and then they also have a new one, CCRA, that is more recent. So it's not just like if you operate in Ohio, you still have to keep an eye on the industry regulations that are outside of just your local area and your local state. So it's something to keep in mind. It's a topic that we could talk about for another hour, but in summary, it's basically that you have to. There's multiple compliance standards, not just PCI, but there's also the individual privacy standards of states and regions, like Europe, even Canada as well.
And then, one thing we've learned, and we'll talk about this here, how, best practices and things like that, so how to comply with all that kind of stuff on compliance, because, we've got 50 states, and, we still can't figure out each state on a federal level of what the compliances are. But again, that's why a lot of these cases, when breaches do happen, they're getting settled in court systems, and, and all that legalized judicial process goes in. But George, what do these breaches teach us about hospitality? What can we do?
What does it teach us about? So very often in some of the breaches that are mentioned here, and I think we might even have one additional slide on it. Social engineering. Uh, Social engineering is, like I mentioned earlier, the phishing, potentially malicious phone calls that are made to mimic the IT team of that organization to try to get a privileged password. So, what it teaches us is that the more frequent and the better training that you can provide, more touch points with your employees, um, to train them for what to spot, and some of the tactics that you mentioned, Katan. If somebody is coming to the IT closet in the middle of the night on the third shift, and overnight, have protocols in place and procedures in place to validate who that person is. It doesn't take much for an attacker or a hacker to try to mimic being somebody from the IT department. You know, wear a golf shirt, put a lanyard around your neck, and you look like an IT person. and I'm making fun of myself because I've been one of those for many years. Carry a box under your arm, something like that. Those are social engineering attacks. Again, train on phishing, do phishing exercises um, to make sure that your employees can spot the keys or the red flags, as we call it, about what a phishing attempt will look like. And always, always, always tell your employees to validate. If something doesn't look right, or something is there's a sense of urgency, which happens a lot in all types of social engineering. There's a sense of urgency. Validate. Like, for instance, sense of urgency, I mean, your account is about to be disabled, or this deposit is not going to be made. Those are usually signs, not always, but usually signs that somebody is trying to get you to do something in a quick manner so that you don't do, common sense doesn't normally kick in. So if you can train your employees about these types of red flags, will be a huge step in the right direction for hospitality industry to be better prepared from an employee perspective. Otherwise, the IT teams have to do all the system monitoring, encryption, strong password enforcements.
I know from my experience, George, specifically when we talk about hotels, there's branded hotels like Hilton, Marriott. They have their own property management systems, and as part of the franchise deal, the franchisor will sign off on maintaining and patching the property, the PMS systems and everything. But then when there's a point of sale systems and then things like that, that's where there's always other networks, right? So the firewall you may have it may be a branded firewall, but then you have another firewall that's in the same data closet that's nobody's paying attention to. So again, is those are the kind of the got-yous where these guys are really trying to come in, because they know, if the mothership is the Marriott corporate, they've got it locked down, and they know they're going to try to get at the property, the PMS system. But then they're looking for other leaks to be it the bar, be it the credit card terminal, be it even a small computer, a back end sales computer that hasn't been updated in a long time. And from my experience, when something happened, we've had older legacy systems doing it, and then those are the kind of things that you want to be careful of, and then make sure that those are updated too. So that again, keep checking. And what comes down to, from my experience, is, guys, is inventory control. You've got to know where all your assets are, be it point of sales, your laptops, your phone systems, your cell phone systems, and having that kind of stuff too. So so any questions so far, guys? I know we're kind of coming here on almost 1 hour, and we're just talking here, so we'll keep going here. So George, what are the financial consequences if you are breached? Can we talk a little about that?
Well, the fines could come in a lot of different ways. I should say the overall costs can come in a lot of different ways. Some come as fines. Some come with the cost of doing a forensic investigation, which are not cheap. Um, Enhancing your security systems. I think in either the next slide or the one after, we're going to talk about what the Visa, MasterCard, American Express, or your acquiring bank, your merchant bank, they can also fine you. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's coming up. In MGM's case, they were fined a total of about 145 million. 100 million was due to loss of revenue. So again, going back to reputational loss, if you don't have guests coming, you don't want to be in a COVID-like situation again, because people don't trust the brand. It takes a major hit on the bottom line. 45 million in fines, as we indicated there. Motel One, we don't know how much they lost. And then Caesar, I did mention it very briefly, but they did pay the $15 million ransom to the hackers to prevent them from dumping their loyalty system database onto the internet. They worked with various experts to transfer that money to the hackers, probably in Bitcoin or some other crypto, to prevent further damage from happening. And then, the reputational damage speaks for itself. You don't want to have that tarnishing your reputation that it's taken years to build.
Yeah, and here's a major lesson learned from MGM and Caesar, right? If here are two big casinos in Vegas, and they have all kinds of IT folks in there, and then they do it, but yet they got hacked, right? So that's number one. And here's where how to do it correctly and how not to do it, right? So with MGM and everything we talk about, guys, these are all updated practices from what we've learned, lessons learned from the last 4 or 5 hacks that's happened in the industry. And it was so funny. MGM had $100 million in revenue loss, but they had cyber insurance to do that, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. And it was so basic that the insurance covered all their losses. So if you look at MGM's losses, yeah, they had reputation, the reputation. They were down for 2 3 days. They had a good system backup. They got back up and running, and then insurance played the 100 million. But where MGM got in trouble, it was a 2 year litigation. What had happened was that because of lack of training, when they went into the incident response mode of taking care of the handwriting all the credit card information, and then once the credit card information was written down, they did not have a proper disposal. They had a procedure in it, but they didn't train the front desk employee to do it. And this is when the SEC or the SEC came in and said that they didn't have a proper training, and they litigated, and that gave them that thing to look deep dive into all their practices. So here's MGM doing everything right, but because they gave them one thing to look at, they had to open all the books. All of a sudden, it's uh, a 2 year litigation going back and forth. And then what was so nice about with MGM, even it was a litigation that was going on, it was the cyber insurance attorneys doing the litigation, not the MGM in-house litigation doing it. Versus if you look at Caesar, they paid it. They paid the ransom, they got it back, but yet they still had ongoing lawsuits, ongoing things that they had to do, and that came out of the bottom line, guys. Versus having a cyber insurance, a cyber attorney, take it off, risk mitigation, and that was the big difference between the two.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so again, so every time we talk about good practices, what a good secure processes and things like that, and this is where all that litigation and judges are coming into play on that. All right, cool. I know we spent a little bit but I don't know. Final thoughts on this, George, of what the fines are and how we go about avoiding them.
Um, we've discussed a lot of it already. So it's typically around $100 per card that's stolen. And then one thing that we didn't mention is the liability of the fraud losses. So if say 1,000 cards, just to make it simple for the example, 1,000 cards are stolen by the hackers. They're sold on the dark web or what have you. They use it themselves, and they rack up $100,000 worth of charges on those cards. The merchant that is found responsible for that breach is on the hook for those fraud losses. So something that wants to be avoided. And I think we've already talked about legal fees and breach notification
All
costs.
right. Okay. Sweet. Moving on. Um, you know, what are high term unique challenges? Can you talk about what challenges are in the hospitality industry a little bit?
Yeah, this is it's not a one size fits all bullet points that we have here, but generally speaking, there is a high employee turnover. We all know this. I should turn it around to the audience to see what the unique challenges of hospitality are. But from what we have observed, there is the possibility of legacy systems, property management systems, and so on. Um, and if there are any legacy systems, they generally do not have security updates happening. So we call those end of support or end of life is an industry term that we use. So any legacy system, if it's not being patched, first of all, it's not in compliance, but it's not that easy to rip out a major system inside of an organization to replace it with a new one. We know it takes time, but those types of challenges seem to be prevalent within hospitality, not for everyone, but generally speaking. And then there's a lot of reliance on third-party vendors,
Very
which
true.
could increase the complexity.
From my experience, what I've seen, guys, is if we have a lot of management companies, and there's a lot of hotels out there, and then there's a head office in a certain location, and centralizing when an employee's terminated or left, immediately getting shutting down their accounts. That has to be an immediate priority. A lot of the challenges that we've seen, the minor breaches. I mean, we're talking about high breach and bad actors, but a lot of the IT systems go down versus the breaches. If that's how I define it. That if you have an employee, who's a general manager, has access to the passwords, they can change the passwords and they can cause all kinds of havoc after they've left, right? Especially when it comes to accounting and sales and doing things like that, right? So if you're terminating an employee and then has a lot of access to it, immediately. I mean, we're talking like within seconds of doing that, right? So I've seen a lot of that. So that's one way to pay attention. Secondly, also in legacy systems, taking inventory of what you have. It's a must. And it's a must in the sense of a lot of automation that's coming through, a lot of insurance companies, and when you get into the incident response versus saying, hey, is my IT systems down or my breach or just of that, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But just having accounting systems, and a lot of hackers are getting smart, like we talked about before. Marriott's and all those, the mothership is what I call them. They've got it packed down, but they're looking for the weakest link, right? It's your accounting system. It's the link back to the home office, right? Office communication, Office 365. They've done a good job. You do multi-authentication on it, but you're only doing it through 365. Do it on the entire thing. So clamp down on it, right? Put the front door lock on it. And then also, when you have that restaurant that we talk about, and it's a different booking system, and leads comes from every different site. We could have bars and restaurants that have a different credit card terminal, and they go through the in-house firewall versus the corporate one. So again, those are different things that we should really dig into. Best practices, and then I know we're coming up on time here a little bit, so we're just going to kind of fly through it, and these are just again repetition. How can the business strengthen their compliance, George?
Okay, so a lot of these points we've already discussed, but one of the major ones is just using proper point-to-point encryption and tokenization. So point-to-point encryption just means the POS terminals that are at the front desk, inside of the inside of the convenience stores and the restaurants, that you're using a certified P2PE device or a POS device. Um, if that's certified, then generally speaking, it's very, very difficult for an attacker to get in the middle of those. They do have attacks for those, but overall, that is the best way. So use certified devices. Do not write credit cards down and process them later. Put them under your keyboard or keep them even worse, in a logbook that other people have access to. So using proper payment processing paths. And will definitely reduce the risk. There's a concept that might be a little too complicated to talk about, which is called tokenization, which is storing a representation of the card, and you could just use it's an obfuscated or a masked card number. So you, Catan, for instance, working with a merchant that has tokenization in place, they have your credit card, it's highly encrypted, but they refer to it by a reference number, and that's what tokenization is. So every time a transaction has to happen, the POS system or the finance system will go to the encrypted vault, pull the card number down, and make that transaction. That's a wonderful way to protect. That's a very technical methodology, so I'm not going to go any further. We've talked about MFA and strong authentication, and always encrypt encrypt as much as possible, whether it's sitting on locally on a server or a workstation, hopefully not on a workstation, but anywhere that it is either going through the network or stored, it should be encrypted, or it must be encrypted, at least in the eyes of PCI.
Okay, thank you. All right, implement strategies. What can a business do to show what how do they go about implementing something like this? There's a lot going on. What starting tomorrow morning, what can they do different?
Okay, well, this we've only got a couple bullet points here, but it actually there's a lot to this. So if we minimizing scope, if we could just go back one, Katan.
Sure.
So minimizing scope is my favorite thing to do when starting with a new organization. So what does that mean? If you don't do proper network segmentation, like breaking up into different networks, your audit for PCI 4.0 will become almost impossible. If you keep you do network segmentation for, say, POS transactions, finance systems that deal with credit cards and so on, and you isolate them with firewall controls or other controls, but let's just use firewall. If you isolate them on your network, then your PCI scope is technically, for the most part, centered around just that small portion of the network. Let's just say it's a big company, MGM. You could just imagine they probably have 100,000 different computers, things on the network, wireless access points, phones, the various devices that are all connected to the network. They, if they isolate it, then it brings down the scope to maybe a couple of thousand of devices being in scope for the audit. So that's my first thing through the gate, is figuring out ways to minimize the scope to as little as possible from a PCI perspective. Other than that, we have mentioned it before, is getting a gap assessment done so that you understand what you're up against. And then, this is a common sense thing. We've got a new standard coming up. Let's do a gap assessment to see where we are and where we need to go. And then the difference between the two of them is the gaps. And then you could start on a remediation plan to start tackling those items. Obviously, previously mentioned, prioritize authentication and encryption updates. And I can't stress it enough. Training of staff and improved security awareness is an ongoing theme for your own, for your organization's cyber posture.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you. Breach incident reports. These are good. We've done everything to minimize it. We've talked about how to minimize it. I am breached now, and how do we go about planning for a breach?
Well, the planning should happen ahead of time. So, there's been some high figure FBI, commissioners that say, I don't know if this is a real quote or not, but it's actually quite realistic, is that there's only two types of companies: ones that have been hacked and ones that are going to be hacked. It's just, the landscape is such a dangerous environment. So having a plan in place ahead of time will reduce the scramble if something were to happen. So have a plan in place. And the support for it, no one's going to have the time to do these things. Okay, maybe IT, but there's going to have to be various lines of business, different parts of the business that have to come together if there's a breach. It's not an IT issue solely. So ownership has to push it down. Leadership has to push it down from a top level, saying this is important. Let's get our plans in place. Very similar to a business continuity plan, like what happens in a situation like COVID. We all scramble. We never thought a pandemic was going to happen, but then it happened. Usually it's just power outages or other weather conditions, but the pandemic happened. So it's similar with an incident response. You have to have top level support, and then you have to have different areas of the business come together for the plan. If like as an example, if our POS were to go down, how are we going to handle it? Okay, IT will busily do their work with the forensics agencies and so on to figure out how it happened and plug the holes. but what is the business going to do in that time? So part of that incident response plan covers those various both technical and non-technical aspects that need to be considered, and doing a rehearsal of it is I assure you, if you haven't been through one, we call it in the industry a tabletop exercise where you run through a scenario. If you haven't been through one, it's an eye-opening experience because you realize things like the contacts on your phone for your vendors, they might be out of date. Or there's been a rollover. You don't have the new account rep or your new whatever sales reps contact information, or the person in IT that you used to work with no longer works there. You identify that some of your existing documentation may be out of date. So it's a very valuable exercise that should be not necessarily promoted, but enforced from the top down. And then it gets to all the different areas. That's my number one advice, is to do a tabletop exercise. If you don't know how to run one, consult with an expert to guide you through a tabletop, and you will be the benefactors of that exercise.
And also part of a attorney will tell you that if you got something planned and you are actively, and when I say actively, at least once a quarter, take a look at it. It doesn't have to be every month, every week, but every 12 weeks, move a rock, right? That's what I go in and say, hey, if you haven't identified all your assets, take the next 12 weeks and identify them. It's just simple things like that, right? There's a lot of things that you can do, and then if you have all these documentations that you've had in place, and if something would happen, you have a better case, in your favor, and then it's always continuing, and it's not one and done kind of thing, right? So that's the lessons learned here. Responding to a breach, right? A lot of what has come out in the last 2 years, guys, is number one. What I've seen is from a cyber insurance. Believe it or not, your number one, your risk insurance that you have, your liability insurance that you have for your business will not cover an incident like this. There's been a lot of, and again, it's continuing. A lot of the risk liability that has been written down, it's more on your hard drive, it's more on your computers, it's more of you having a server in your location. What has changed in the last 2 years is iCloud breaches happening beyond on site, right? So the communication piece, your firewalls. So that's why business insurance aren't going to cover it. On the other side, the cyber insurance because now they have data, the insurance premium has come down. They, as an insurance company, has gone in and saying, hey, if you take an active approach and show us that you have, firewalls are minimized, you have your documentation, you have your training, you have a cyber attorney. And then cyber attorney, there's a difference between an in-house attorney versus a cyber attorney, because the minute something happens on a cyber, an incident happens, the client privilege that you have with a cyber attorney, all of a sudden that minimizes your incident of reporting. You still have to report it, but because an attorney, a cyber attorney, can go in and says this is client privilege information, we're not going to give it to the masses. That has been the biggest favor in getting the litigation out. And look at MGM, they were able to do it. They were, so the whole point here, guys, is start looking at the business as this data breach as a process. Things that they do after a breach is, an attorney can get involved. There's a breach coach that will come in and say, okay, hey, we just got breached over the next, MGM, for example, they were down for 3 days. Okay, let's get this system up. This is important. And then just trying to, just have somebody that's traffic, controlling traffic on when it's hectic and it's 24/7 and you're trying to figure out what's going on. There's just a lot of moving parts to it, right? And then having a PR firm in doing that. And then also, your compliance for each state that we talked about and things like that. I know, George, I took your thunder. Sorry, I get a little excited about it. So, any final thoughts on that, or what do you on the breach?
No, I think you covered it well. I had nothing further to add there beyond what you mentioned.
Okay, all right, sweet. Um, you know, um, what to do, guys. I know George had mentioned we got 11 days. uh Officially it is still that the deadline has come and gone, but it's from a practice in perfect, things that you can do looking at your feet, it's still, get started yesterday, right? That's the answer. Fines are going to come in. uh the compliance police is out there. They're reaching out, and the if you do everything right, the court cases are in your favor. And bottom line, guys, you can't do it alone. Going from my experience, and George, I don't know what you think, but from experience, but if you want to start something, it has to start from top down and getting all your department heads involved. It's not an IT issue. It's not an HR issue. It is, you have to get your sales, your marketing, your attorney, even get your in-house compliance attorney, and an outside expert, because it's ever changing. So I don't know if you had any final thoughts, because, and then again, I'm just kind of rushing through it because I know we've got a little bit on time, and I did want to leave some time for questions and answers here a little bit. So
The only other comment I would make, Katan, is if you don't have the in-house expertise, would be to reach out and have somebody guide you. We know how it is. If you could try to go it alone, and it could take 6 months, or you can get an expert and be done in 6 days, or at least have an understanding and a plan in place within
oh,
6 days.
absolutely.
And cannot stress that enough. I've seen it many times, and I don't want to beat the point up too much, but it will certainly help.
It's we tell everybody, it's a matter of time before you are going to get breached, guys. It is going to be, you're going to get breached, and the key is how do you get up quickly, right? How do you keep that minimum data down to a minimum? Just That concludes our presentation. I know next week we're a lot of as part of our webinar series on the innovation and technology, we're going to talk about video surveillance and AI. And again, that's going to be a week from today. And I'm sure Joe and Michelle will have some more updates on that's coming. But I just wanted to kind of get my little ad in there for our next thing there. So, and then also, if next steps, if you found this to be information, you feel a little overwhelmed, again, thank you, George. Thank you for all your time. I understand it. I want to open up our just time for questions and answers. But again, here's my email, here's my cell number, and then I got a QRC code here. If you want to go ahead and take it, it will take you to my LinkedIn profile. And on my LinkedIn profile, I do have my calendar on there. Go ahead and just book a meeting that is mutually accessible. And then I can sit down with you guys, and if we need to get George involved in specifically to your requirement, and talking about assessments. And again, it's 1 free hour, guys. I highly recommend you guys take it upon it. It's not going to cost you anything. We'll ask the appropriate questions and at least give you saying, hey, here's your biggest gap, here's where you need to be, and what are next steps for you guys. So again, thank you, George. Thank you, appreciate it. Joe, Michelle, thank you. This is our last presentation. And then, I'll turn it over to you guys. Quit the sharing, and
I hope we didn't overwhelm everyone with the complexities.
no.
We do want to give a chance for participants that stayed for the link to have any questions to you. So if there is any Q&A, we just want to give a chance for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're on the call and you want to unmute yourself, if there's anything you'd like a follow-up, additional, or to ask, please feel free to do that. Okay. done a good job of addressing those questions along the way. So we appreciate that. I would like to thank both of our presenters for sharing their knowledge and expertise, and also, as was reinforced at the end, being an ongoing resource for you. This issue will continue to evolve and change after the current pending deadline. This is something that we will be dealing with forevermore. So please feel free to use both of these experts as we do move forward. Thank you for your interest in staying on top of what's an important technology issue. We hope that you'll continue to engage in the Innovation and Technology Initiative. And the next opportunity to do that is the same time next week, next Thursday, March 27th at 10 a.m. We will discuss AI-powered video surveillance and how to use smart technologies to transform the security function within hotel and lodging businesses. This has obviously been one of our policy priorities this year. If you're following what's going on, the work that we're doing regarding the increase in crime that's been impacting many hotels. Um, Joining us will be Keaton and Gabby Bachon of Global Business Solutions, which is an IT company that specializes in infrastructure. He's an expert on AI powered video surveillance. How can we use some of the technology and tools in a smarter way? So watch for details in the registration link for that session, which we're going to send out today. After today's session, make sure that you participate, or if you're not the right person, feel free to pass that on to anybody within your companies, organizations, and operations that would like to engage in the discussion about smart surveillance and using AI for better security results. We'll also have additional informational sessions throughout the year on more topics with more experts. Watch for information about other OHLA events outside of the Innovation and Technology Initiative, our events, our meetings, our committees, programs, opportunities that we have for you to engage. Get in touch with us anytime that we can be of assistance to you. So thanks again for participating. If any of our participants will give them one last call, any last questions or parting comments? If not, thank you so much for attending today, and watch for the invitation for next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.